I hope Rex Murphy and Conrad Black live to be 120, but the National Post is doomed by its own hiring decisions. What a shame. That all said, and it's a long preamble, but I have to give that Trudeau bailout newspaper credit today, because the National Post actually nailed it today. Here's their front page. Take a look. Look at that story in the middle. CBC's brainstorm of first world problems is to blindside everyday English by savaging us as intolerant if we use a blacklist of allegedly tone-deaf words that we shouldn't grandfather into the lexicon. How lame. Now that's a bit of a weird sentence, isn't it? It's like, you know that phrase, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog? Do you know that? That's a sentence that uses every letter of the alphabet. So it's fun and it's to practice typing, right? Well, that weird sentence on the front page of the National Post, as you can sort of tell in red, uses 10 of the 18 words the CBC says should be banned. Seriously, that's the story. Here's the tweet by CBC News. I love that part. It's CBC News. This is the news, people. This is not opinion. This is news. Have you ever casually used the terms spirit animal, first world problem, or spooky? It might be time to rethink your use of these phrases and remove them from your daily lingo. I swear I thought that was a joke, something from a satirical website like the Babylon Bee. It is a joke, but the joke's on you. You pay $1.5 billion a year for this. That's the joke. But how depressing to see the reactions to that tweet. All the CBC journalists across the country started saying, oh, okay, I've got my new marching orders now. I mean, here's Trudeau's CBC propagandist assigned to Saskatchewan. She says, I didn't know about some of these. Got any thoughts? Yeah, Stephanie, this might be one of those things that you leave for the Toronto office. There might be some really hip cafes in downtown Toronto near the CBC headquarters where only triple vax people go and they're required to sip their coffees through a mask, where this kind of thinking is normal, Stephanie. I don't think it's going to fly in Tisdale. Here's another CBC hack who says, great work here by Priskesh, highlighting an important truth. Words, how they're used, matter. So this is an important truth, guys. This is the truth. It's not an opinion, it's the truth. Here's another one. This is the worst of all. They don't actually say anything other than the headline, words and phrases you may want to think twice about using, but this is the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission. This is a government agency that prosecutes people for hurting feelings. So obviously they're really excited about a new thing to get offended about. They have a new list of banned words. Here's the story itself on the CBC homepage. Historical, cultural context important for phrases like grandfathered in and spirit animal. I'll read a little bit. It's written by Priscilla Ki Sun Huang. And her biography, I'll just read this before reading the article, says, Priscilla Ki Sun Huang is a reporter with CBC News based in Ottawa. She's worked with the investigative unit, CBC Toronto, and CBC North in Yellowknife, Whitehorse, and Iqaluit. She is a Master of Journalism from Carleton University. Oh my God, what a racist. Whitehorse? Yellowknife? That's even more racist. And seriously, master? She's a Master of Journalism? You know what a master is, right? Doesn't she know the word master was the word used for people who had slaves? Is she a slave master? I'm so triggered. Am I doing that right? So only she gets to be that crazy? I want to say something. Yesterday we talked about how people who come to Canada, come to America, sometimes come for freedom, and sometimes just come because it's better, perhaps financially, than where they came from. I think Priscilla was born in Canada, but she is of Korean heritage. It makes me very sad that someone whose nation is cut in half, where the north half of Korea is under totalitarian Orwellian slavery, is calling for word police and thought police. It makes me terribly sad that a Korean Canadian is doing that. It would be like if a Soviet emigrated Canada or American. I mean someone whose parents fled tyranny. Maybe they were in the Gulag. If the kids became enthralled with Marxism at university in Canada and started becoming word police tyrants like back in Stalin's day, it's how I feel when I see anti-Israel Jews. It just makes me sad. So let's go through this article. Have you ever casually used the terms spirit animal, first world problem, or spooky? It might be time to rethink your use of these phrases and remove them from your daily lingo. It's a news story, guys. CBC News. This is news. CBC Ottawa compiled a small list of words submitted by readers and some of our journalists who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So there's no more racism towards, say, the Irish or Italians or Jews. Were they allowed to make contributions to this list too? I mean, I didn't know when I was young that the word paddy wagon is derogatory towards the Irish. I just didn't know. Now I know. Apparently the CBC doesn't know it yet either, since a quick search of their website shows 22 articles where they use that slur. But of course, they're just white Irishmen. Who cares about them? The word redneck can sometimes be used by people to describe themselves, like when Black people use the N-word themselves to take ownership of it, take the power away. Here's nearly 200 hits on the CBC's website of the term redneck, and no, when Trudeau's state broadcaster publishes that word from Toronto, it is not always in a loving way, is it? But who cares? White people aren't allowed. They're not involved. You saw it for yourself. By the way, this is what they do in Ottawa's CBC. The country is in a terrible crisis. Parliament barely even meets anymore. Most government is done by executive order, often by health bureaucrats no one's ever heard of before. National unity is a mess. Inflation, floods washing out BC highways, crime, of course, housing prices. There are one or two stories that you might think, oh, I don't know, reporters at CBC News in Ottawa would care about if they're in the news business. But while the world burns outside their window, they're busy making lists of words they don't like. I'm serious. CBC News. But it gets better. Apparently some experts got involved, because, you know, there's experts in hurt feelings. We ran some of the words by anti-racism and language experts who said some of these phrases can be hurtful to various groups of people for their historical and cultural context. Experts, got it. What is an anti-racism expert? In my experience, it's often a racism expert, someone whose job is to spread division and hatred and bickering and foster disunity, and to train new immigrants to Canada to think that we are an unwelcoming place even though we just welcome them. Being an English speaker doesn't entail that you necessarily know the racist etymology automatically, said I.E. Taniguchi, a linguist and an associate language studies professor with the University of Toronto, Mississauga, in an email to CBC. Etymology is the study of the origins of words and the way their meanings change over time. The fact that you said it oblivious to the etymology doesn't automatically make you a bad person. What you do once you find out a word is racist, sexist, or ableist, etymology carries more importance, she explained. Who's Ai Taniguchi? Have you ever heard of her? She's here to tell you that you aren't necessarily racist, sexist, or ableist, but if you don't immediately agree with her to stop using words she doesn't like after she tells you what she thinks they mean, you will turn into a racist, sexist, or ableist. It's like the 5-second rule when you drop food on the ground. Well, you got 5 seconds to stop saying words she doesn't like, or then you'll be a racist, sexist, ableist. I had never heard of this professor. I found her Twitter account pretty quickly, though. It's sort of what you'd expect someone with her pronouns in her bio, who tweets pictures about knitting for her cats. I'm not making that up. That just makes me laugh. That's so on the nose. But I noticed that she immigrated to Canada, and she actually grew up in Japan. Now, I got to tell you, I really like Japan. I admire so many things about it. I think it's a very civilized country. But I don't think it's really controversial to say that it's, I'm sorry, it's pretty racist. It allows nearly zero immigration. It has an ethnic superiority complex towards many people, including other people in Asia. That's just part of its culture. I don't think I'm being mean by observing that. I'm not going to even get into the rape of Nanking or anything horrific or the supremacism that launched Japan into a terrible war. Like I say, I truly admire Japan, but it's just a bit much for someone who came to Canada from a 99.9% racially homogenous country that literally accepted 47 refugees last year. 47, not 47,000. It's just a bit much for someone from Japan to come here to tell us we're racist when we say the word blacklist. I'm not picking on her for being Japanese. I'm picking on her for being a total bloody hypocrite. And maybe just a teeny tiny chance of it here, I mean, just guessing here, maybe she's a racist herself. I mean, they have a superiority complex over there in Japan. I don't know if that's her. She feels quite at home lecturing Canadians about our racism. Perhaps it's because she feels an ethnic superiority to us. I don't know. I've never met her. She looks like a kook in her social media. She's never met me either, though, but she says I'm sexist for saying the word grandfathered or whatever. And hey, even if you think they're crazy, there's a lot more of them. So maybe you're the crazy one? I'll read some more. Anti-racism trainer Jas Kalra agrees. It's not so much about political correctness. Oh, sure it is. I think it's about the empirical accuracy, and if somebody really calls us out on a particular word, we need to stop and say, it's not about me, said Kalra, who runs Ottawa-based Jas Kalra Consulting and coaches people and organizations on inclusion and diversity. I'm sure she does. She's all for inclusion except for language and people she doesn't like. But look at this next line. This is from a black man, but I put it to you, this could be said by a white Klansman. Let me quote, blackmail, blacklist, and black sheep. The issue here is that these are all negative terms, said Joseph Smith, an anti-racism trainer and educator. It connotes evil, distrust, lack of intelligence, ignorance, a lack of beauty, the absence of white. This lowering of blackness on the spectrum with regards to value was developed further in the wake of the transatlantic slave trade, but it also predates that, explains Smith. Can I ask a question? Are you crazy? A black hole. It's not negative, that's its color because it absorbs all the light. Black sheep, that's the color of a sheep. You know what we call someone who thinks black is negative? We call that person a racist. It reminds me of this wonderful sketch by comedian Ryan Long. I'm gonna play the whole thing. This is a perfect video. Take a look.
When me and Brad first met, I didn't think we'd get along, but turns out we kind of agree on everything. Your racial identity is the most important thing. Everything should be looked at through the lens of race.
Jinx, you owe me a Coke. We both have a lot of opinions about people of color, even though we barely know any.
I say colored people, but as long as we're classifying them, we both think minorities are a united group who think the same and act the same.
And vote the same. You don't want to lose your black card. Sorry, I don't know. I just think we should roll back
discrimination laws so we can hire based on race again. Jinx, now you owe me a Coke. Hey, tell them what you told me yesterday.
White actors should only do voices for white cartoon characters.
I've been saying that for years. Stick to your own.
Us white people, we have so much privilege.
I agree. It is a privilege to be white. Ask him about interracial dating.
All I said is that black men who date white women have internalized racism, and white men that date ethnic women are fetishizing them.
Guys against interracial dating now. Like, am I being pranked? Did Boomer put you up to this?
Ugh, you know that taco place is white owned?
White people should be making white foods, like Kraft macaroni and cheese, no seasoning, not even salt. It's like he's a mind reader. I mean, I've been pushing for segregation forever, and my man does what?
I created an improv comedy show exclusively for ethnic people.
Guy segregates comedy on my birthday.
White people need to stop wearing dreadlocks, and they need to stop appropriating black people's music.
Shaved heads and country music, the way God intended.
You know all white people are racist.
I'm listening.
Even if you have a black wife or a black friend group, you're still really racist.
You know, we just kicked a guy out of the organization for having a black girlfriend, but if you can promise me he's still really racist, we'll consider letting him back in. Black people should only shop at black businesses.
I guess the only thing we really disagree about is I think white people are the root of all evil.
But what did I tell you, though? If we can narrow that down to a certain group of tiny-hatted white people, I think we can come to an understanding.
Technically, I don't consider Jewish people white.
Neither do I.
Isn't that perfect? This article on the CBC goes on and on and on and on and on. You know what phrase they hate? You're going to laugh. First world problem. People have slowly moved away from using the term third world to describe low-income countries, says Kalra, but the phrase first world problem is still used to convey that something is an issue only to those who live in a country with privilege and wealth. It can be classist, she said. When we're saying first world, we're putting them at the top. What does it convey, she said? Why do we have to use these prefixes, which kind of dehumanize some country or some human being or a group? No, it's a sign that you're too rich and too privileged and too pampered, and you have a fake job as a diversity coach, and you have such luxury and such ease in your life, you can spend time talking about things like this, that you can actually get a degree in this, that you can get a job with the state broadcaster in their news department, and instead of reporting news as your country burns down, you and your friends can come up with fake problems in the freest, least racist country in the world. I love that these pampered academics claim that they care about classism, as if they would even tolerate for 1 second a genuine working class person of any race. Have you ever met a real person? Have you ever been to a factory? Have you ever gone to a bar? And I don't mean a bar where they charge $20 for a gin and tonic. I'm talking a real bar. Real people use words like blacksmith and Manitoba. They even sometimes tell offensive jokes. Don't tell me you're not classist. This story goes on for pages. I'm not going to read it anymore. It's too long. I know that it's, look at the bottom there, it's part of a series called Being Black in Canada. And who better to tell us what it's like to be black in Canada than a Korean-Canadian academic interviewing a Japanese immigrant academic? That's really speaking to the streets of the inner city, isn't it? Oops, sorry, not allowed to say inner city. Let me read from the story. Ghettos and inner cities were typically seen to be places where less refined people lived, the people who weren't up to date culturally, development-wise, he said. No, you wicked liar. It actually just means the inner city, which is different from the suburbs. The inner city is where apartments and condos are. The burbs are often where houses with yards are. So single people, poor people, young people are in the inner city, including many new immigrants who haven't climbed the economic ladder yet. If you won't even say inner city, you probably won't fix the problems of the inner city. You know, I remember talking to a wonderful professor of English from, I think it was University of Oregon in Eugene. And he was a black man himself, an accomplished author, award-winning. And he was talking to me about calls to ban the book Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain because there are some words in there that are today considered unacceptably racist. I know that's surely true about one of the greatest pro-black books of all time, one of my favorite books I've ever read. It's called Uncle Tom's Cabin. You got to read it. It's a big book, but it's a great book. It's an anti-slavery book that sold so many copies. It sold 300,000 copies in the United States when that country just had 30 million people. That was the Harry Potter of its day. So many people read that book that when Abraham Lincoln met the author, a woman named Harriet Beecher Stowe, he said to her, I think I've told you this before, he said, "So this is the little lady who made this big war." He's talking about the Civil War because this book galvanized people against slavery. Look, that book has many bad words in it too. It was written 150 years ago, and that book helped emancipate the slaves. Ask Abraham Lincoln. But that professor, we were talking about whether the right word was black or African American or Afro-American or person of color or colored person, and I was yielding to him. I wanted to hear what he thought. And he said, I remember, I got to try and find that old video. This was at Sun News. He said, you can use any word you like. And then he said, you can use the word sir. But if you don't actually fix any of the problems affecting black Americans, you're nothing but a dilettante. You don't actually care. In fact, it's hiding the fact you don't care. And he was bloody right. He was right. You know, the CBC is worse than that, though. They want to sow the seeds of racism and division. They claim to be anti-racists. They're actually the racists. They claim to want to heal. They actually tear apart. If Canada were a racist hotbed, people wouldn't be streaming here in record, unrelenting numbers, legally and illegally. I admit there are some racists, like our black-faced prime minister's true. But those are anomalies. These hucksters at the CBC, including people who come here from truly awful places, but then call us the awful ones, they're the racists. They're the dividers. They're the bigots. Let me close with this. This is from Orwell's book, 1984. You ought to read it again, and you'll remember what it's actually about. It's about a lot of things. It's about a mad world. But one of the tools of the madness and the control isn't just the TV screens that watched you. Wasn't that a premonition? It's not just the informants that ratted on you. It was the language itself. They called it newspeak, that replaced English, that removes words from the language so you couldn't think thoughts. Let me read a little bit from 1984. I'm just going to read a little bit. By 2050, earlier probably, all real knowledge of old speak, that's what they called English, will have disappeared. The whole literature of the past will have been destroyed. Chaucer, Shakespeare, Milton, Byron, they'll exist only in newspeak versions. Not merely changed into something different, but actually contradictory of what they used to be. Even the literature of the party will change. Even the slogans will change. How could you have a slogan like freedom is slavery when the concept of freedom has been abolished? The whole climate of thought will be different. In fact, there will be no thought. As we understand it now, orthodoxy means not thinking, not needing to think. Orthodoxy is unconsciousness. Oh my God, that is coming true. So yeah, I got to tell you, I'm not going to stop saying words because some Trudeau racist at the CBC state broadcaster tells me to. And I hope you don't either. That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.